Hello and welcome to another episode of Pokémath. And well, I've been very excited to start with this one because today we're going to discuss Control using the new Fusion Strike expansion that it's still, we can still call it new. It's out there, and I'm joined by no other than Sander Wojcik. So welcome here on the channel, Sander.
Thank you for introducing me and having me on. I always like discussing some control decks, so I'm excited.
I hope everybody can hear us out there because we're just running live here on Twitch. So, for anybody who are watching this live or maybe watching it back on YouTube, we will take any questions that comes in the chat if they have any questions for Sander. Otherwise, the plan is Sander knows it, I knows it, but to tell all of you about it out there, I have this beautiful control list here in front of me now. So I open my PGO here, and we got a lot of interesting to discuss. And everybody who's seen Sander on his Twitter go mad when he talks about all these cool control style decks and cards and everything. And I, for one, I love all this stuff here. I love all these deck types here, so it's a wonderful opportunity to get to talk with Sander about this. Sander,
Yeah,
I'm looking at this beautiful deck. What's up?
yeah. I guess there's a lot to go over. I'm not sure. Is the camera working on the stream?
Everything is working beautifully on the stream, I hope, because I see it back on the stream. So if any viewer out there thinks everything is fine, let us know, or if something's missing. This is a good time to chime in and say, hey, it's okay, or maybe something's missing, because I see both of us. I hear
Yeah,
both of
I
us.
just checked the Twitch page, and I think maybe the camera is frozen. My camera.
No, I don't know. Maybe I'll double check
Yeah,
that now. I'll double check that
yeah.
now.
I think my camera is frozen on
People
the
just,
screen.
people just. I think you're back online now. I think,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
frozen,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's frozen anymore. I think our viewers have been very aware of that, and thanks everyone out there for helping us out with this. I also think that it's good to go. So, Sander, with no further ado, I
Yeah.
look at this.
Yes.
I look at this, and a lot of things are we know this, we've seen this, but there's some really cool new additions we got to talk about. So where do you want to
Yeah,
start?
so I guess to backtrack a little bit, we don't really see a lot of control in like tournament results. That might also be the case because in best of one, playing a slower deck is just kind of first of all you might die, and even if you play very fast, it might not be the best experience because it's very exhausting to always have to play very quickly. So we don't really see a lot of results. And also, I think obviously one of the reasons why we also don't see a lot of control is that we don't really have good comeback cards, and we don't really have that strong of a late game engine. Nothing like Oranguru or Excadrill, and we don't have anything like N or VZ Stamp to give you like some comeback mechanism. And we all know that the comeback mechanism cards are usually extremely strong in control because your game plan is controlling the board state, and if your opponent takes 3 prize cards, but you have control of the board state, that is completely fine with you. That's actually your game plan. So at that point, if you have something like N or VZ Stamp, which gives you a stronger effect, depending on how far ahead in prizes your opponent is, that is perfect for control. And also, these type of cards are very weak against you because you don't take prizes. Like, for example, a card like Raihan, which you might say is like one of the few combat cards in the format. It's obviously extremely weak against control. So the fact that we don't really have a lot of combat cards and don't have an insanely strong late game engine, kind of combined with the fact that most tournaments are best of 1, 25 minutes, means we don't see that many tournament results with control. But I think at this point in time with Fusion Strike, I think control is pretty legit. Especially one of the like meta-wise things that has happened with Fusion Strike is I think before Fusion Strike in Shedding Rain and Evolving Skies, the meta was extremely wide. If you wanted to play a control deck, since you can't rely on your late game as much, you really had to play some very anti-meta cards and disrupt your opponent in the early game and leverage anti-meta cards like Jolteon and Dusknoir and kind of shut down your opponent in the mid game. That kind of had to be your focus. Um, but the meta was so wide, you had like you could say like there were like 10 different decks that all made up like 8% of the meta, and you could face like so many different types of builds. You had like Sylveon, Leafeon, Rapid Strike, Single Strike, Ice Rider, Shadow Rider, Zacian Santa, like Jolteon, like there were so many good decks. But with Fusion Strike, I feel like for the first time we are getting a bit more of a centralized meta. And you can really see this in the tournament results actually. Because Mew, the Fusion Strike Mew is, you could say it's like a cut above the rest. Because it's so consistent, it has such good damage output, and it has such an insane engine compared to all the decks that play the Inteleon engine. But of course, Mew, it is kind of, even though you have some utility, it's kind of like one note. You have just a VMAX that hits really hard into the active. So if you have some type of attackers that trade well with it, like dark type attackers, this Fusion Strike is beatable. So I feel like we kind of have a meta of Mew VMAX and decks that try to counter it, and then we also have a couple of the strongest decks that are still around, like Suicune, Ludicolo. In general, I would say the meta is a bit more centralized around Mew and decks that can beat it. And then a couple decks like Leafeon and Suicune that are just strong in general, and they can probably also have a good single strike matchup. So they kind of they beat the counter to Mew VMAX, as well as being strong themselves. So I feel like for control, that makes it a lot easier to prepare, because you have I feel like I have a better view of which decks are actually good in the meta. And that makes the deck building a little more focused. So for me, when I was building this deck, compared to the metas before, I felt like I had a much more clearer vision of which cards I wanted to include, because there's just not as many decks as before that you have to keep in mind. That makes sense.
That makes, at least for me, that makes perfect sense. We've seen it before, and now with a more, so control thrives in a more centralized meta. That's also what I get from this introduction here. And we are indeed moving towards such a scenario again, which is, of course, good news for control. Although it has to be built in a completely different way, as you mentioned. We don't have any comeback cards, so we have to be more proactive in a sense, right? So the things that you're also going to see back on the list we're looking at here is more aggressive cards, where you want to try, even from the beginning of the game, try to put your opponent into a board state that is beneficial to you, rather than waiting for the longer game. Well, they are going to get a long game, but it's different this time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure the case. Like this last list plays four Crushing Hammers, double Fan, and the two Yogrunts. And I think that is like a very important part. Like you can't let your opponent just take the 3 prizes for free. It's too hard to deny them taking the last couple prizes. So you really have to play a good amount of disruption. Also, there's like the Yellhorn. Also because the Galarian plus Boss is maybe like the most efficient win condition. So the list plays quite heavily into the Galarian Boss win condition as well. But in general, the energy denial is also quite strong against a lot of the decks that don't have energy acceleration or limited energy acceleration.
Yeah, we do indeed observe just 8 cards only focused on energy denial, and to top it off with, one card I find particularly interesting in the meta that we have seen being formed right now is this Yveltal on the first row here, which is not even from a main set that came out in Celebrations. In that card, I hope you don't mind, Sander, but let's start here. I think this is a fun place to start when we talk about energy denial.
Yeah, I think Yveltal is... I love Yveltal so much in this meta. There's just so many special energy decks. I feel like the one special energy deck that it isn't good against is like Rapid Strike, because on the turn they attach their energy, they can Rapid Flow, and they discard it themselves anyways. But it is an extremely strong card against Mew, and also it is actually pretty relevant against Single Strike. And these are like the 2 most played decks. And also, there are a decent amount of decks that just play Capture Energy. I feel like a very big part of almost all decks are like VMAX attackers, or they play the Inteleon line. So there's a lot of evolution cards running around. And one of the things we lost in rotation is Pokemon communication. So decks only have 4 quick balls unless they're out for a basic. So let's say you have 4 quick balls and 4 times your regular basic that has to evolve into a VMAX, or for the results you only have 8 outs for turn 1 basic. And although that's a decent amount, pre-rotation, we had actually, if you played a couple Pokecoms, you had 10 outs. So decks are kind of missing a couple outs to basics. So decks that can actually play Capture Energy to kind of buff up the amount of outs you have to your evolving basics. I mean, this deck also plays Capture Energy, of course.
Of course.
But I feel like a good amount of decks in the meta that kind of rely on the fact that they have Capture Energy to improve their consistency, or they are Psychic decks and they play Fog Crystal, like Dragapult. I think one of the reasons Dragapult has been so good is because it has 12 outs. You have 4 Quick Ball, 4 Fog Crystal, and your 4 Dragapult V. So the odds of benching your Dragapult turn 1 are pretty high compared to a deck like, let's say, like I saw like Gengar Inteleon, the new Gengar.
Yeah.
But that deck only has 4 Gengar and 4 Quick Ball. You don't have Capture Energy, and 8 outs to a basic. I think it's only like 70% to find a turn 1 unless you also have a draw supporter. So I feel like there's a lot of decks like Suicune and Single Strike, and like decks like Leafeon, and even sometimes Sylveon, decks that really benefit from the fact that they have their own Capture Energy to make up for the fact that we don't have Poke communication anymore. So with the amount of Capture Energy running around, Yveltal has a good chance to get value, and also, this is also the reason why I'm playing the double Fan of Waves, because there's just, even the decks that don't completely rely on special energies, a lot of them still play Capture Energies. So Fan of Waves, I mean, it's no secret that Fan of Waves has been a very good performing card in the format. You see people play it all the time, even in Mew VMAX itself. It's a very common tech card. But in this deck, this really plays into the idea that without combat cards, you can't let your opponent go unscathed through the early game. You want to reset some of their tempo. You want to maybe force them to play a research to get better cards because you are stopping their energy attachments. And yeah, that's the reason why the heavy Fan of Wave count is pretty good. And going back to the Yveltal, it also means Yveltal has a pretty, I mean, it is mainly for Mew VMAX, I would say, but you can use it in a ton of matchups. It's a really good card in this meta.
It has a lot of things, and one thing I noticed now when you spoke about Fan of Waves, there's an interesting note I think that should be made here. You see the new supporter that's played in VMAX as well, and that's where Fan of Waves actually loses some of its advantage, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So to talk a bit more about control in general, because control, you're so focused on your disruption cards. But one thing you always have to keep in mind is how your disruption cards line up against your opponent's resources. So one clear example is how, for example, Team Yellgrunt against the Welder deck is awful because Yellgrunt, and then the energy goes into their hand, and they Welder, and they are attached 2 energies, and they draw 3 cards. So you can easily see that this trade-off between Welder and Yellgrunt is heavily in favor of a Welder deck. So when Welder is around, maybe you don't want to rely on a card like Yellgrunt too much. And you can kind of see the same with Fan of Waves. When you Fan of Waves, there are Fusion Strike energy into their deck, and they have Elisa Sparkle. They can just accelerate it instantly again. So in that sense, Fan of Waves doesn't line up well against Sparkle, and that's why you kind of really need the Yveltal. It's pretty important that you have it to actually get rid of the energy once and for all. There's some other cards that I have considered, cards like Rugged Helmet, because it puts the energy into the. And I was playing a card we were talking about a bit earlier. I was playing Stunfisk, and I really liked Stunfisk.
Oh, one of my favorites also. Oh, yeah. Card's fantastic.
I really like it because for this exact reason that you want to have this early game disruption. And when you combine this early game disruption, and on top you have a Stunfisk in the active, this really plays into the way you have to play control, and like you have to be as annoying as possible in the early game because you can't be too passive. And Stunfisk really plays into this game plan, like decks like Dragapult and Leafeon and Sylveon. Like there's a lot of decks that really don't like hitting into a Stunfisk combined with all your other disruptions. But Stunfisk, since it's an ability, it doesn't work against Mew VMAX if they have a Fusion Strike energy attached. So that one, unfortunately, like I said before, it's like one of those cards that doesn't line up well anymore. It used to be pretty good, I would say, but right now, also I really liked Stunfisk against Jolteon, for example. but right now Stunfisk doesn't work well against Mew because Fusion Strikes blocks the Snap Trap ability from working. But one card you could that I have considered was Rugged Helmet, since it kind of does the same thing, and but I feel like you can get around it too easily and it's kind of inconsistent. You can't find it like Stunfisk you would find with all your outs to basics.
I noticed something interesting about the deck, by the way, Sandro. Speaking about like Energy Denial is a perfect place to start and talk about here, but you're missing potentially what maybe it's very naive of me to think, but I think it's one of the best cards released in Fusion Strike, and I don't see it in your list. There's a specific supporter called Sydney.
Yes.
I think I honestly think it's a fantastic card. So
yeah. I have played a lot with Sydney, and I think it's pretty good. I think so I was playing this deck, and I tried a lot of different cards in this deck. That's like why you see certain cards in this list, and some and others they are not here. Like I was trying Azumarill, I was trying Ribombee VIV, I was just trying Jolteon instead of the new Gorebyss to see if there's a difference. And like I said, I tried Rugged Helmet and a couple other cards. And
I feel we're gonna get back to Gorebyss in a moment. So
yeah. And one of the cards was obviously Sydney, which is one of the cards we got from the latest set. And the thing about Sydney is, in general, the card is very flexible and very good because it hits so many different type of cards. Like you can hit special energies, but even against a deck without special energies, you can still hit their air balloon or their stadium, so you can win the stadium war. So because it's such a it blanket hits a lot of different type of cards. It's not like ever gonna be terrible. But in practice, I felt like the one thing I didn't like about Sydney is the one thing that I feel like is one of the most important parts of this list, is that I really like the Mew VMAX matchup, and I like the single strike matchup. And I also don't dislike the matchups like Leafeon and like Sylveon for as far as that's attack. And I think like Rapid Strike's not that bad either. But the one matchup I have the most trouble in is the Melanie decks, the decks that play Melanie. Because they have burst acceleration and they can put a lot of pressure, and they usually have the Inteleon engine. And without Jolteon in this list to stop shady dealings, they have very good access to their resources. So it's kind of when Jolteon was in this deck, you had a decent shot at just breaking them, because without shady dealings, it stops a lot of their deck. Even though Jolteon takes more resources, it was pretty effective against the Inteleon engine. Of course, you ability lock their entire engine. It's pretty strong.
I got something interesting here, Sander, because as I raised I got a question from the chat regarding Sydney, actually. So maybe that's a good time to ask that. So,
yeah.
I'm going to read out the question here for you. So the question is asked, isn't Sydney good against the new Inteleon VMAX, since the Rapid Strike energy that you assume they use for their attack goes straight into their hand?
Yes, it is. It is. So the one matchup that Sydney is actually very crucial is that matchup. When you play it in that matchup, you very much win that matchup. But I felt like Sydney, I don't think it's actually good against the Melanie decks. Whenever I had it against Melanie decks, you are almost never gonna want to play it. It's like just not work, especially against like Suicune. They don't play stadiums. They sometimes don't even play air balloon.
No,
and spending your turn playing a city when they have like Suicune charge, it's like not actually that strong. Like you might hit one of their 4 capture energies, but they can attach it. Like it's not guaranteed. It's like not a guaranteed hit. And I felt like since the one reason why I'm not playing Sydney is because I'm playing Perrserker. Perrserker can do the same thing in terms of tools and in terms of stadiums, right? You can also discard stadiums with Perrserker, and you can also discard air balloons, or you can also discard scuba nets. And you can discard actual switching cards, you can discard bosses, and you can discard Melanie itself with Perrserker. So I felt like against the one matchup I wanted to improve. Like I was playing this deck, and I didn't have Perrserker in it, and I had Sydney in it, and I felt like I was beating I was beating Mew VMAX, I was beating Single Strike, I was beating a lot of the non-energy acceleration decks. I mean, I still had some trouble. I think Jolteon is still a difficult matchup. But the one matchup I had trouble in was just the Melanie matchups, and every time I played it, I felt like Sydney was especially weak in that matchup. So in general, I felt like Sydney was like kind of targeting it was targeting decks that Dusknoir was amazing against, Yveltal was amazing against. Because Dusknoir and Yveltal, and Fan of Waves, like Duskull, Yveltal, and Fan of Waves, those already like really pretty much hard counter special energies, right? And then I was also playing the Sydney, and I felt like out of that package, the Sydney was the least impressive, especially when you can get some of the same effect from Berserker. And Sydney is very much a weak card against the Melanie decks.
It sounds like it becomes a win more card actually at
Yeah,
some
it's kind of
point.
like a win more card, and it does hit certain decks it does counter decks certain decks very well, but I felt like I had better cards against. So, for example, the one matchup where Sydney is absolutely amazing is the new Inteleon VMAX that does 140 when you put the energy back in your hand. But even in that matchup, when you get Dusknoir out, you win the game if you
Yeah,
get Dusknoir and Gorebyss.
indeed,
So
indeed, because that locks it
I mean,
completely out of the game in that sense.
yes, and you can also they don't always play that many switching cards. You can also win with Berserker, and since they have to put the energy back in their hands, they can't really like manual retreats. If they have no energies and you can boss trap something, I mean, you can win that matchup without Sydney. I mean, I do have to admit, if you play Sydney, that matchup gets very, very easy. And if that matchup is like let's say that matchup is like more than like 8% of the meta, then sure, I would consider Sydney. But I don't feel like that matchup is the most important one, and I feel like you can win it. And in general, Sydney kind of, most of all, Sydney kind of hits the same decks that I'm already hitting pretty hard with Yveltal, Dusknoir, and Fan of Wave. And when this list plays Berserker, I feel like it's not as unique of an effect. I feel like if you don't play Berserker, having some way to disrupt your opponent's hand becomes a lot more valuable. And I'm playing the Berserker most of all for the Melanie decks. And I was really, so this is kind of, I guess, a pretty important topic for this deck, because I was really trying to figure out the best way to deal with the Melanie decks. Actually, I sometimes write like my actual notes. And I was just
Good
going
old
over.
handwritten notes.
Yeah. Sometimes I mean, usually sit so much behind the PC. Sometimes I like having no technology and just being alone with your own thoughts, like having no distractions. So easy to sit behind the PC and get a dopamine rush from
I know
checking
that, and
out
for anybody who
technologies.
written with Sander before, he can go off the grid for several days only to hit you with a brick of a store of a text
Yeah,
coming
I
out of
mean,
nowhere. So yeah, yeah.
sometimes having just kind of not having technology around you and just actually trying to focus and think it's help. But anyways, so I was thinking about the ways the best way to actually deal with Melanie decks. And I ended up with Berserker. I'm not 100% sure, because I think one of the things that I am considering is going back to Jolteon, even though it is very counterintuitive. Because first of all, Gorebyss it saves so much deck space, and Gorebyss is actually way easier, because the thing about Jolteon is you have to get one additional card for it to work, and you need a memory capsule on it. So
Yep.
not only do you need more deck space for Jolteon, but getting a functional Jolteon is more effort. And
And
one of
easier
the
to
things about
counter for your opponent, huh?
yeah, and one of the things about Jolteon is also the memory capsule always was a pretty hard card to find, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why it would be counterintuitive to play Jolteon is because there's actually less Inteleon engines in the format, because Mew doesn't play it and Single Strike doesn't play it.
No, that's true.
So it would be kind of a bit counterintuitive to go back to Jolteon when we see less Inteleons to counter. But Jolteon does counter the decks that I feel like this deck has somewhat of the most issues with.
I think there's
And
one important note here that has to be made regarding Gorebyss, of course, because Jolteon blocks Drizzle, Gorebyss doesn't.
Yes.
I think that's an important difference also.
Yeah, that is the most important one, right? Shady D-Links, they can still shady D-Links. And one of the things I also noticed when playing Gorebyss is that Scoopupnet becomes like one of the things about Jolteon that the reason why I like Gorebyss is a lot of the times they get to use shady dealings before you would get a Jolteon in play anyways, right?
Yeah.
You would play like if you are playing a list with Jolteon, you are not very often gonna get Eevee turn 1, Jolteon turn 2, and Memory Capsule turn 2. So I always felt like by the time you get your Jolteon into play, they have already used like triple shady dealings, and you are mostly using the Jolteon to counter quick shooting. And in that sense, Gorebyss would just be way better. But when you are not playing Jolteon and you are playing the Gorebyss, one card that gets way better for them is their Scoopupnet, because they can Scoopupnet their shady dealings in Talion, and then they can use the Drizzle again, and they can use shady dealings to Sword Shield base set Talion another time.
Yeah.
So in the late game, since all the Inteleon decks they play Scoopupnet, they get a lot more shady dealings, and they can basically cherry pick all their resources. So even though I also felt like Jolteon, it felt like kind of very inconsistent to get it online on turn 2 or turn 3. And if you get it later than turn 3, a lot of the times your opponent already has used their shady dealings. So I felt like Jolteon already was more of a card that was stopping quick shooting. But what I didn't realize as much is that when you are not having Jolteon in your deck, their Scoopupnet resetting their shady dealings makes it very, especially the decks that play like 2 or 3 Scoopupnets. It kind of means that the Inteleon decks, they can just keep resetting their shady dealings in Inteleon, and they really get to get all their resources at the right time. And Jolteon actually prevented this. With Jolteon, even if you got the Jolteon kind of late into the game, it did stop the Scoopupnet reset for shady dealings. So if you get a Jolteon kind of like turn 5, turn 6, you would think, okay, maybe this Jolteon is just stopping the quick shootings, but it was actually also stopping the resets, the Scoopupnet resets. But I feel like Jolteon, it is still a lot of commitment, and there might also be other cards to counter Melanie. One card that I have been considering and I haven't tested as much is finally playing Clefable.
Finally.
Yes, I've been thinking about Clefable for a while, and it is one of those things that, like I said before, since Control is very much about early game disruption and mid game disruption, because you can't go into the late game being too passive. You really have to think about how your disruption cards line up against your opponent's cards. And one of the things that is very clear about Melanie is that when you Crushing Hammer Water Energy, first of all, on average you're going to need 2 Crushing Hammers to discard 1 Water Energy. And then discarding the Water Energy just gives them a way to Melanie it back into play. So in that sense, you would almost rather have, like, for example, have a Rugged Helmet, and they hit into your Rugged Helmet, and then you put the energy back into their hand, and then on your turn, you Yell Grunt their second energy, and now you have put 2 energies into their hand. This is almost better than Yell Grunting their 1 energy into their hand and discarding their other energy with a Crushing Hammer, because you would almost rather have their energy be stuck in their hand than in their discard, so they can Melanie it again into play. So in that sense, Crushing Hammer kind of is a bit of an awkward card sometimes against Melanie. I mean, sometimes it can also be decent, and one of the cards that could be nice is Clefable, because it puts the energies on top of their deck. So when you combine Clefable with Yellgrunt, and you can play Scoopupnets to reset Clefable, you can put the energies on the top of their deck and in their hand, and it kind of makes it hard for them to keep chaining their Melanie. They would need to find quick balls over and over, and they maybe need to research, but when they are building their hand, Melanie is a card that builds their hand, and if they maybe have to research their important resources, it would be very awkward. And Clefable could also be decent against some of the like no energy acceleration decks. Like it shouldn't be that bad against decks like Leafeon and Dragapult and even like Mew. Although Mew again has the issue that if they have Fusion Strike energy, you can't actually Clefable an energy. But I've now seen some lists that play more basic energies. I think if Mew decks go into a heavier basic energy count, having Clefable could be kind of nice because you can Fan of Waves the Fusion Strike energy, or you can Yogurt the Fusion Strike energy and Clefable the Psychic energy. And one thing about Mew that kind of gives Mew some way to be annoying is that Mew, the Mew basic has a pretty good attack.
Yeah.
From Psychic, searches an energy from their deck and attaches it on the field. And right now it's not that big of an issue because Yveltal is just so strong against the deck that even though they have some form of energy acceleration, that's also, by the way, a reason why Fan of Waves is kind of awkward. Because they also have energy acceleration from the deck with their basic Mew V attack.
But of course, Sander, now when you talk about Clefable, and it's a really cool card, and we've seen it sometimes being played already, but it wouldn't work. It's more space consuming, of course, because it doesn't work very well with Zoroark's ability, if I understand this correct. Because of course you have to play it from your hand to trigger it. So it takes more space to play, of course.
Yeah, it is not like it would. You would really have to lean into it heavily. One thing I don't like about Clefable as well is I think it's really bad against what's it called, Rapid Strike. We don't see much Rapid Strike anymore because it has weakness against Mew. So, but I always felt like when you are playing against Rapid Strike, you don't, because Clefable also only hits the active. So that's can be kind of clunky. So I always felt like you really want cards like Fan of Waves and Yogurt to make sure that they are not charging an Urshifu on the bench. But one card Clefable could also be kind of nice against is Moltres. Because against Moltres, again, you're actually happier putting the energy on top of their deck instead of in their discard pile. So I feel like maybe go into a meta where Moltres sees more like deck play in decks like Leafeon, not Leafeon, decks like Sylveon, VMAX, and decks like Urshifu, Rapid Strike. And if we see more Moltres, I feel like playing a what's it called, Clefable could also be kind of interesting way to maybe if you Yogurt energy into their hand and you put an energy on top of their deck, that can actually be more annoying for them than putting energies in their discard, right?
That is indeed true. No, you hit some excellent points here, and regarding what to choose, but again, it's meta dependent, of course. But I think this is time to take to another point of the deck that I think is also very interesting to consider. Because you mentioned you play Perrserker, which of course requires a metal energy to trigger its important attack. And then I see you chose Morpeko over Dialga, for instance.
Yeah.
Is there any particular reason for that, Sander?
Yeah. So this is the one other thing that is vital to control. So I guess we're going to talk about Morpeko.
We're going to talk about Morpeko.
So I'm not playing Dialga. I'm not playing Azumarill. So, I mean, first of all, the reason why Morpeko is in this deck, just to kind of give a quick recap of how control works in general. In control, your game plan is stopping your opponent's game plan. What you are trying to do is making sure your opponent can't win. And when you are trying to make your opponent not win, and your opponent is not winning, what happens in games is that neither party is winning. So the game drags on and on and on. When the game drags on and on and on, if you have some way to generate resources and your opponent doesn't have a way to generate resources, you in the long haul, you're gonna win the war of attrition. And that's why cards like Lusamine, Resource Manager Oranguru, Sablehide, Junkhunt, I mean Excadrill, I mean you can I mean basically anytime
the list goes on.
Yeah, when there's a resource recovery card, even a card like Morpeko, you can easily see that this is quite a bit weaker than some other ones that we have had. It is still the card like Munchlax with Snack Search.
Yeah.
And about cards like these, the reason why they are so important to control, and it does matter how strong they are, because it kind of matters how quickly you can snowball and lead. But the reason why they are in the deck is not for turn 5 or turn 6 or turn 7. They are here because you are stopping your opponent from winning, and you are not actively playing a win condition that is ending the game necessarily. And but you're kind of creating a situation where neither party is actively winning the game. And if you are getting back you would think maybe getting back an item is really that impressive. But over the course of multiple turns, this really starts to add up. So why did I choose Morpeko instead of Dialga and Azumarill? I guess I can I guess Dialga is the simpler one, because I've also tried Azumarill. And Azumarill, I feel like, is a card that a lot of people are pretty hyped about from Fusion Strike, and I have tried it a bunch, and I ended up not playing it. So first of all, Dialga, which has an attack very similar. It gets back one card from your discard pile for one basic metal energy. And the reason why I'm playing Morpeko over it is just purely practicality, because it uses metal energy and this deck plays 4 capture energies. So you have way more energies to attack with Morpeko. And since I only play 1 metal energy, it would be kind of awkward to use Dialga. I have Opal, I have Rotom. I mean, we can talk about the engine a bit later. I think the engine, by the way, is the best part of the entire deck. But the reason why I'm not playing Dialga is because it uses colored energy, and the colorless energy is actually really relevant, as well as it's actually better for Morpeko to have fewer HP because it's level ball searchable, which is quite good. But I would say even more importantly, it's recoverable with Rescue Trolley, which I'm playing as a one-off.
Yep.
So even though I only have 1 Morpeko, I can just get it back with the Rescue Carrier. Also, Rescue Carrier is pretty good with, I mean, of course, it's pretty good with Chinchino. It's also pretty good with Zoroark, because you discard the Zorua, and then you can get it back instantly with Rescue Carrier. So that's kind of a neat way to get more Zoruas. So Rescue Carrier kind of functions as the 3rd Zorua and the 2nd Morpeko at once. And with Dialga, you can't loop your Dialga with Rescue Carrier. So I feel like Morpeko is actually more practical, and even though you can only get items back, because you can get Ordinary Rod back and you can get Palpet back. Ordinary Rod recovers energies and Pokemon, and Palpet recovers supporters. So you can kind of recover Pokemon's energies, supporters, and items through Morpeko. So the only card you can't really recover with Morpeko is your Stadium, which is Galarian. So
True.
The one card you can't really get back is Galarian, but I feel like the trade-off is definitely worth it. I feel like Dialga is just way less practical, and you would have to kind of change some other cards when you play Dialga. And I feel like Morpeko is just it slots into the deck so nicely, especially with the Rescue Carrier, which is a good card in general, I would say. And then I'm not playing Azumarill, which, like I said, people were really happy to see Azumarill. It seemed like a great, nice addition to Control, because you can play it with Zoroark. Even though it's a stage 1, you can be kind of efficient about it, adding it into the deck. And one thing people noticed quite quickly is that you can play it with Seeking, and I actually like Seeking more than I like Seeking more than Azumarill. I think Seeking is pretty interesting because the energy disruption angle is so important. And some decks without energy acceleration can really have a hard time against Seeking. But in the end, I felt the thing about Azumarill in particular, why I don't like it, is that I don't think Azumarill does anything that Morpeko can't do. With Azumarill, you recover only Pokemon and supporters. You don't recover energies. You can't recover items, but you get triple. You can get triple supporters. But even though it can be nice, the first time you use Azumarill to get like multiple bosses or a combination of bosses and Zoroarks, it very quickly becomes overkill. Like, there's no point in recovering triple supporters or getting like infinite Zoroarks back, because what's the value you're getting out of getting that many resources back? And you do have to keep in mind, actually using Azumarill takes more resources out of you. Getting a Azumarill means you have to get a basic, a stage 1, and then a basic energy. Like I said, we are playing way more colorless energy. We're playing quad capture energy. So using Azumarill takes more resources, and even though you get a bigger payoff, you actually can't use the payoff. Like, you get more cards, but you can only play 1 support per turn. If we had something like Lieutenant Surge, Azumarill would be amazing, but we don't. And getting double Jogent back doesn't really do anything. Getting multiple Zoroarks back, you're getting more resources back, but you're also using more resources to attack with Azumarill. Like, you would need to attack with double Azumarill back to back. You would need a Zoroark, a Zorua, and a basic energy, and that again. So you would need 6 cards in total. And with Morpeko, you just need a Morpeko and energy, another energy, and a rescue cat. It's like just way less. It's way easier. It's way easier
And
to
you can
get into
spend
play.
your cards on other cool stuff instead, of course.
Yeah, yeah. So I felt like the payoff just wasn't there with Azumarill, and I also like in some ways it's worse because you can't get items back. And Morpeko for Palpet is like efficient enough. Getting Palpet back is compared to Azumarill, it's like it's worse, but it's still completely fine, right? And with Azumarill, one other issue is that you're not preventing deck out. One nice thing about Morpeko and the fact that it combines with Palpet and Ordinary Rod is you are actually not decking out ever because you are shuffling back supporters and shuffling back Pokemons and energies. With Azumarill, you what ended up being the case is that you, even if you're playing Azumarill as your late game engine, you still have to play something else to not deck out yourself. So at that point, you are playing a card that requires more resources, and you also have to play something to prevent yourself from decking. And you really can't leverage the fact that you're generating more resources, especially in the late game. It's not like chaining Azumarill in the late game is better than Morpeko. I would even say it's worse than Morpeko.
Mm-hmm.
The only moment that Azumarill is better than Morpeko is when you haven't drawn your deck yet. But I'm usually happier just using Intrepid Swords and not spending my Zoroarks on Azumarills. Spending my Zoroarks on Gorebyss and Dusknoirs instead, and Perrserker.
I
And
think,
then also water
yeah.
energy. I mean, water energy was not that big because water has a lot of interesting tools. Like I said, the Seeking is a very legit card.
Yeah.
And when you play water energy, you can also consider Carbonable, which is another card that I've tried a bunch, which is maybe something we can also talk about.
When we get around to the tech cards, indeed. But yeah, I think there's still a couple of things we should discuss before we get so far. And now you gave a pretty detailed description of why Morpeko is the choice compared to, say, Azumarill or Dialga for this matter.
I love Morpeko.
I think everybody understood that based on your answer.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if we had Lieutenant Surge. If we had Lieutenant Surge, Azumarill would be completely broken.
Oh
right?
yeah,
We would just get
it's a
Yelvin
completely different story, of course.
Yeah, but we don't, and yeah, it's just more effort for no payoff.
Like
I
what
mean,
I
the
could tell
payoff
you
is
now,
like,
just imagine a format now when we had Lieutenant Surge combined with Team Flare Grunt, just how much fun we could
yes,
have with that, right? But
idea
that's
would be
not the
good.
case. So
Yeah, true.
I think this is a moment where we're going to take a look at. So you mentioned very briefly, but now we're going to really dig into it. The engine is your favorite part. And of course, you
Yeah,
touched upon it already a bit here and there, and now you also took one part of the late game engine, in a sense of Morpeko being serving that. But if we look at the main core engine of this deck here, we see Chinchino, and besides being grabbable by level ball and has an interesting attack on its own, what more is there to it?
yeah. So the draw engine of the deck, I would say, is in terms of like pure quality, it's
Yeah,
the best part of the deck. The fact that you can play the Chinchino Lovable engine, that's like half of it. But the other
yeah,
part that this deck excellent is the Zacian and Intrepid Swords, with combined with also having Snorlax. But Cinccino is really good, and it kind of is like doesn't see as much play anymore because of the Inteleon engine being kind of like a better way to go about things for most decks, because you can quick shooting the Cinchinos and they have relatively low HP, and most games are kind of, in a 5-turn game, it's gonna be better to have shady dealings to get the exact cards you want every turn, compared to just having like the make do and kind of manually draw more cards, but you are not necessarily getting everything. But in this deck, since your games take so long, which I've touched upon before, you play so much disruption, the games naturally are going to be a grind fest. So over the course of a long game, Cinccino gets so much value, and the one-shot effect of shady dealings, over the course of a long game, it gets
yeah.
overtaken by value of make do, and we have Gorebyss, of course, to protect Cinccino from quick shooting, so that's not an issue either. And of course,
Chinchino's not a fun boss target either, of course.
no, it's only one prize. I mean, for certain spread decks like Dragapult and Urshifu, the low HP Cinchinos are like a good target. But then again, we do have some pretty hard counters to Rapid Flow with Dusknoir. And we have so much energy disruption for Dragapult, especially now since we have Yveltal on top of everything else. So you can definitely win against the spread attackers as well. I think Jolteon is one of the harder matchups, by the way.
Yeah.
But going back to the engine, the Chinchino engine, the fact that we have Level Ball makes it very, very, very easy to set up. And the Level Ball engine has become a lot better. And it kind of has because of just the one Pyukumuku, which is something I didn't expect. I really like the Pyukumuku. I think it's like to me the most. I mean, I also really like Yveltal, but that's more of like a purely meta card. But the fact that you can turn your level balls into basically draw one card later on, it is way more relevant than you would think. And also it makes it makes drawing through your deck a lot easier, especially when you need to draw certain cards in a certain order, especially when you're like using Palpad to set up your deck to be a certain combination of cards, having the Pyukumuku.
I completely agree. This Pyukumuku is a fantastic card. It does so much for you, and we already before this, people watching this episode live or back or anything, we already had a discussion about Pyukumuku. A lot of cool things you can do with it, but another thing that you're already in on it here, but it essentially turns your deck from a 60 card deck into a 59 card deck.
I mean,
dramatically improving all other odds of whatever.
I've always liked Judge Whistle in the first place, even when you can't get it back.
And so that's a card you've seen before, and now you have a reusable Judge Whistle, essentially.
Yeah, it basically turns your level balls into Judge Whistles, which is really good. And it's like one of those things that really benefits Control the most. Because it's something in a short, it's not necessarily something all decks want to play. Because it's like such a minor effect, but in Control, like all the small details matter. I mean, it's kind of also not all decks play as many level balls, and one of the things is also this deck plays a lot of basics, so you're not that likely to start with it.
I was just going to mention that's the only fear you're having with this. If you open Lone Pyukumuku, which of course we can just calculate, that will destroy so much. But as you point out, the chances of that, especially when you play the course of best of 3, man.
Yeah, and you also play. I have started it, and then you can scoop up net it. I've actually scoop up netted Pyukumuku after starting with it. The Pyukumuku has been so impressive, honestly. It also means I'm very happy to play 4 level balls. Because before I was always, one of the issues this deck has is that level ball, even though it finds the Chinchino engine, it doesn't find Zacian and Snorlax. And you have to keep in mind that Zacian and Snorlax are you're kind of like your main attacker throughout the first 5 or 6 turns of the game, right? Like you're using
sounds funny you're calling them attackers, but yes.
Yeah, you are basically using Intrepid Sword to like draw 3 cards or Snorlax to Gorbin dice throughout the majority of the early game and even the mid game. So you really rely heavily on the Snorlax and Zacian, and that's also why we are so happy to play so many disruption cards, because every time we reset an energy attachment and our opponent can't use an attack, we are basically drawing 3 extra cards because we get another turn to Intrepid Sword.
There's a point, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Sander. There's a point we should maybe raise about Pyukumuku and the talk on level balls and Judge Whistles. There's a nice little restriction on Pyukumuku that you can only use it once per turn.
Yeah, that's because you put it on the bottom of your deck. That's completely fine. Also, you can only use it once. That's
Indeed,
I guess
that's the point. Yeah.
Yeah, but the reason why this is not that big of an issue in Control, because you get a lot of turns, right?
Of course, you get a lot of value.
Yeah, you can use it like 5 times easily, and in most decks, you're not gonna have that much longer of a game, longer than 5 turns. Like in Control, you can easily use Pyukumuku time and time again to like kind of filter out your deck.
Oh, there's so many cool things here, and now you mentioned the whole engine and stuff, and you've also been in on
Yeah,
how can you calculate the odds of getting your Zacian turn 1 because you really want to use Interpret Sword on
yeah,
your first
yeah.
thing?
That's like one of the things I always try to calculate with hypergeometric function.
There you hear it,
Like,
folks. Even in Control, the hypergeometric distribution is a very good thing to know.
yes, yes. Especially, I mean, it's like the most practical for like turn one situations. And the one I use, it's not completely. I mean, I'm using basically the simplified. I'm just using the simple version. I'm just saying this deck has 9 out to a
Yeah.
Zacian or a Snorlax on turn one because you have double Zacian, one Snorlax, which is 3, then you have double Quick Ball, so that would be 5 out, and then 4 capture, so that's 9.
Yeah, they calculate. It's a conservative
It is,
estimate, of course.
yeah, it's a conservative estimate because some of these are basic, so you're a bit more likely to start with them. But I'm not gonna. I haven't taken the time to do the exact.
Don't worry, Sander. That's what I will spend my time on in other Pokémath episodes to deal with.
Yeah, that would be kind of maybe interesting. But so one of the things, maybe this is interesting to talk about. One of the things that I always thought, so you really want to get to turn the early Zacian or the Snorlax. Because
True.
if you think about, even though Chinchino is really nice, if you trap it sword 2 times, that's like better than triple make do. So getting your Zacian or in play, and the thing that you also have to consider is that card draw kind of snowballs. If you can Zacian and entrap it sword on turn 1, it means you are more likely to find more Chinchinos, which can draw you more cards, which can help set up a second Chinchino, etc., etc. You can find more draw supporters. So getting the earlyization is extremely important, or the Snorlax. Sometimes Snorlax is just way better. But so one of these two. So, and one of the issues I always had when building this deck is you want a lot of level balls because it's extremely efficient at setting up Chinchino. But then level ball doesn't find Snorlax sensation. So I always kind of was like min-maxing, like how many level balls do I actually want? But with Pyukumuku, now you have a very good reason to play more level balls because they don't fall off as bad as they used to. And I kind of on in the same since we are like on this subject of like the opening turn.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I actually in my pre-Fusion Strike list I was playing the Rotom, which has the Rotom Search ability.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know exactly what the ability is called, but it has an ability that finds 2 Rotom items from your deck. The reason why there were 2 reasons why I was playing that Rotom, and one of them was because it turns your level ball into a Rotom bike. So right now I'm not playing Rotom bike, of course,
Oh.
because Snorlax is just better. But when your level balls also become an out to basically a Gormandized type of effect, Rotom bike draws up to 6, and then your turn ends.
I can tell people out there they're not seeing this because Sander's not seeing this, but other people just saw my PTO just randomly going like, I'm just gonna log out. Yeah, that random log out as usually happens.
Typical PTCGO stuff.
Yeah, but the good news is we're completely back where we were before now. But yeah, that's hopefully live will not have as much this issue as PGO. But okay, back on topic. Sorry for that, Sander.
Yeah. So the Rotom, the real reason why I like it so much is because it basically every opening hand you have where you don't have an authorization, but you do have a level ball, you can just find Rotom, which finds the Rotom bike. So you kind of have like a very nice way to turn the level balls, which you want to play a lot of, into cards to draw your more cards on turn 1. So I felt like that was such a nice like segue into having more level balls and have level ball being out to a turn 1 Rotom bike. And then also, Rotom Phone is such an amazing card in this deck because it's like card selection, and you play so many one-offs. And right now, I also even right now, I'm playing one Rotom Phone, and it also combines really well with Pyukumuku, right? You can just
Indeed.
because you want to wait as long as possible. So let's say you have double make do, you have 2 Cinchinos in play, and you have Rotom Phone. And you do your first make do, and you draw 2 cards, and then you would have to use your Rotom Phone, and then use your second make do, and then you draw your first card that you put on top with the Rotom Phone, and then another random card. But it's actually way better to do make do one time, another make do, so you dig 2 cards deeper. Then you do a level ball to take the Pyukumuku out of your deck, and then only then you use Rotom Phone. So you see 2 cards deeper with your Rotom Phone, and then you can get the card you Rotom Phone on top with your Pyukumuku effect. So Rotom Phone kind of combines. I think it combines really nicely with Pyukumuku. But in the version I was playing with the actual Rotom, obviously Rotom also finds Rotom Phone. In fact, I think the Rotom is just pretty efficient because it finds two cards, finds two Rotom items. It's just a kind of like an actual efficient card in itself. And then it turns your level balls into an auto Rotom bike, and it also enables Speed Lightning, which I was playing
Yeah.
in the earlier version. And my thinking just was that Speed Lightning just as not as an energy card, but just as a draw two cards type of card.
Yeah,
It's
so
just
that was
actually,
also something I had to ask you about because, and I guess many had that point of view. Like,
yeah,
wait, you're using your energy not for energy, but for 2+2,
yeah,
essentially.
but it's kind of the same to me. Like if you think about it, in the late game you use your capture energy not as a capture energy, but just as a colorless energy for Morpeko, right?
Yeah, true.
You just attach to Morpeko, you don't get a basic. Usually you already have all your whole benches already full. You just use it as an energy. And in the early game you use it as an authorization or to Snorlax or to Minccino or to Zorua. And then late game you just use it to attack. And the Speed Lightning, you would either use it late as just another energy for
Yeah.
Morpeko, or you would use it in the mid game as a way to just draw more cards. I mean, we have seen that Lightning Energy is such an insane card because obviously card attacks like Pikarom
Yeah.
remains tier one for like forever because Speed Lightning is just such an insane card if you think about it. It's just draw two cards for one card, like no downsides. So
I think this is a good time to take a question from the chat because you're on the topic of cards that could be teched in this deck or things that could work in here, and we got a question from the chat asking I think a very straightforward question: how hard can matchups become if someone is playing 4 Marnie? Is it then worth to play Milotic to get around these 4 path 4 Marnie decks? Because we don't see a
uh,
Milotic in the current list here.
yeah, um, I have tried Milotic a bit. In general, I think Milotic is it's kind of slow, right? Because usually the most annoying part about Marnie is the Marnie in the early game.
Yeah, like a turn
And
1 or turn 2 Marnie. Yeah.
yes, and then if you get Marnie, then you have a Milotic. I mean, you can get Marnie before you have the Milotic in play. How thick is your Milotic line gonna be to get it into play early enough? And I guess to me, Milotic has become a bit more legit because if you read Gorebyss actually only stops your opponent's Rapid Strike Pokemon. And actually,
Yeah.
Milotic is a Rapid Strike. But if you have Gorebyss and Milotic in play at the same time, your own Gorebyss isn't gonna stop Milotic. But it used to be the case that your own Jolteon would stop your own Milotic. Because
That's interesting.
Milotic also is a water type, so um, I I used to always think like there's no way that Milotic is that reasonable because I'm gonna play against an Inteleon deck. I'm gonna put my Jolteon in play, and then I can put a Milotic in play, but my own Milotic won't be working because of my own Jolteon. But right now that wouldn't be the case, so it's a bit more of a consideration. But I think it is kind of slow. I also think a lot of the Inteleon decks they don't play Quad Marnie. Some do, like Dragapult,
Sure,
but a decent
you can
amount.
be sure most decks will play Marnie, but indeed they also have to play it first turn to really make it bad for you.
Yeah, and the Drizzle decks they can Marnie turn two very consistently, and on turn two you're not gonna have a Milotic in play. And
No.
also the decks like Suicune, Rapid Strike, even I think like Leafeon, they don't always play full four Marnies because they have the Drizzle to find it anyways. I feel like the thing about Inteleon Engine, like I think I've noted this before, is that they don't play the full counts.
Yeah.
They don't play like four switch. It's on the play like one switch. They don't play four air balloons or they play like one air balloon. They usually only sometimes play like double balls because they have this Inteleon engine that they put a lot of consistency cards into, so it takes up a lot of deck space. But even if they play the low counts, they can pick up their card whenever they need it. But this kind of also results in the fact that not every deck plays four Marnies. Usually the decks that play four Marnies are the decks that don't play the Inteleon engine, like Single Strike, and decks that rely on like maybe like spread, like Jolteon and build because they actually want to target their opponent's Italian engine and combine it with Marnie.
Also an observation, that is made now based on your Jolteon argument. It would also block your own Pyukumuku, right? And you don't want that to happen.
Jolteon, I've read Jolteon. Jolteon
Oh,
doesn't
from
actually.
play. That's right, from play,
Yes,
right?
it is kind of somewhat confusing, but because
Oh, you're right. You're right. Oh,
I guess
that's
I don't
a
know.
good one, yeah.
Even Black Power Plant didn't stop Greninja GX. So I think usually abilities in the hand don't get blocked.
Ah, that is
Which,
true,
I mean,
because Pyukumuku you reveal from your hand, right? So it never actually hits play in that sense.
Yeah, and one more thing about Milotic is I think the one moment I like in Milotic is actually pre-rotation when you are playing the handlock deck. And in the handlock, what you are doing, you are trying to have this Exodia turn, right? Where you go reset stamp with Jesse James, maybe like Surge and Bulls, and have like a Weezing and a Chip, and you wanted to build this combo in your hand, and you didn't want to play your pieces one by one. You are never gonna be like, oh, it's like turn 3, let me play a random Jesse James, or I'm just gonna randomly chip you. You wanted to have like this whole you wanted to have this very specific combination of cards in the same turn and lock out your opponents. But this deck is not as much of like you're not really like building up this very precise combo turn. You're, like I said, you're very proactive. Like a lot of the cards are instant play cards. You play Fan of Waves, Yelgrants, you play a lot of cards that you're just throwing at your opponent to disrupt them. So even though Marnie hurts, it's not like this deck is like building up like 10 cards hand every like all the time. And you're not really you're more about like just throwing the roadblocks at your opponent as you can throw into them. So in that sense, I feel like Marnie, even though it is annoying for sure, it's not like this deck needs a specific combination of like 3 or 4 cards in hand. The way that Exodil Handlock or like Orango Handlock would try to have. So I feel like those type of decks, they would really benefit from Milotic because the whole game resolves around this combination that you play from your hand. And protecting your combo in hand with Milotic is for that reason is extremely valuable, because if you can protect your hand combo that can win the game, you can win the game via that route. With this deck, it is all about developing your board, getting Dusknoir into play, getting Yveltal into play, getting Zorua into play, getting Gorebyss into play, playing your hammers, playing your Fan of Waves, playing your bosses, your Gather Mines, winning your opponent out of resources, and eventually with Morpeko. And even though Marnie, it definitely resets you. I mean, it is definitely annoying, but to me, it feels like with Milotic, what am I really protecting in my hand? Sure, if I have a 6-card hand, it's annoying if I get Marnie. But I can also get just another Chinchino in play instead of a Milotic, and maybe that is like better. And not all decks play 4 Marnies.
Oh, that's a great answer, Sander.
Yeah,
I got only one thing. So we already, I think all the Pokemon has actually been discussed in this deck list here, but there's one just for completion. You have not talked about Mew yet. I just see this Mew floating around the list, and yes, it's good, but why? Why over Jirachi, for instance, or another card that could also boost consistency?
Jirachi, I mean, the Mew is, I think the Mew makes, the reason the Mew makes sense is, again, because you need the early game disruption. And Mew finds Fan of Waves, it finds Crushing Hammer, it finds also Echoing Horn. And this deck is playing Birdkeeper anyways, and you also have Scoop Up Net, and Mew is level ball searchable. So I feel you really want one pivot. And the reason why this deck can also get away with only one Mew is because, again, we have Rescue Carrier. So if you actually really want your Mew, then you can, like the Rescue Carrier serves very much a dual function. Like you can get any deck card, you can get like if you price too many Mincinos, you can get more Mincinos back, so you get targeted down, etc.
I can already see you opening with Mew. Use the ability, hit a quick ball, find Snorlax, or retreat into Snorlax and use it again. All these kind of things you can do with Mew in the first turn.
It also really increases like your early game outs.
It's really cool.
And it finds disruption, which is very important. And it finds like evolution incense, and it finds level balls. Like using Mew to just find level ball for an extra Pyukumuku effect. Like kind of nice. I mean, I would say it's definitely better than Jirachi. Actually, though, there are some real downsides of Mew. And the real downside of Mew is that it's Dark Weak. And it can actually get really easily KO'd by Umbreon. Umbreon KOs it for 1 energy. And even Houndour with 1 single strike energy, it one-shots it.
Ooh, that's dangerous then. Oh,
Yeah,
that's the
because
real difficulty here, yeah.
yeah, the Dark Weakness is surprisingly relevant. So, but I think it's way better than Jirachi because it's just seeing 6 cards deep is pretty good, and it combines also with like Capture Energy. It can also find the Rotom, and Rotom and Opal are kind of like the only ways to find the basic Battle Energy and find the Twin Energy.
You mentioned something very important here, Sander. I was gonna pick out anyway, and that's the Opal because I know that's a Sander favorite.
I love Opal.
I heard this magical combo pre-rotation that was called plays Lieutenant Surge, play down what's the supporter called again to make your flip yeah, indeed, and then follow up with Opal to make sure you get that 1 card you needed.
Although to be honest, that was more of a joke. It's actually not something you would ever do.
I know, but I've seen you do it. I've seen people do it because they're like, "Oh, I see Sander do it. This looks cool. Let's do that. Be sure I get that 1 card off."
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think Opal it is better than people give it credit for. I mean, I could go in a whole tangent why I think people, why this card kind of gets like overlooked, and kind of has to do with the fact that, I mean, do you want me to explain why I think Opal isn't as bad? I mean, I still think the variance is like,
I'm 100% ready to hear this here. You know that.
Okay.
Even
So-
though I already know what rant you're going to start on now, I think everybody would
so this
benefit
is
from
the
hearing
whole-
this.
Okay, so if you look at Opal and let's say you compare it to a card like Timer Ball. Let's say, for the people who don't know Timer Ball is you flip double coins.
3.
For every
3, right?
blue search you get an evolution. So on average, you're gonna 50% of the time you're gonna get 1 evolution, 25% of the time you're gonna get 0, and 25% of the time you're gonna get
2.
double evolutions out of your deck. So if you compare it to Evolution Incense, the expected value is the same. Both of them on average are gonna get 1 evolution, but the variance you would think like maybe I don't want the variance, maybe I'm risk averse. But actually, the Timer Ball is just straight up worse than Evil Incense, and this is because getting double evolutions isn't twice as good as getting 1 evolution, and getting 0 is, it has no value at all. Because you are not always going to have double. Let's say you only have 1 Minccino and you just want to get 1 Chinchino. If you flip double heads, you're actually you're not getting the full reward. You're only going to have 1 evolution to evolve.
I think we call this a decreasing returns to scale, Sander.
Yes. So and one other example that you could come up with that really illustrates this point is, let's say there was a card and you would flip 2 coins, and if for every head you would search an energy out of your deck. And if you compare this card to Energy Search, you would easily see that Energy Search is just better because flipping double heads and getting 2 basic energies out of your deck isn't twice as good as getting 1 energy, because you can only attach 1 energy per turn anyways, and getting 0 heads would be disastrous if you just need 1 energy, because the energy you get out of the energy, like things like energies and with the Timer Ball evolutions, they have like limited value because they only have as much value as how many you can put down. So even besides the risk of adversity, cards like Timer Ball and this theoretically energy search card that would flip coins instead of getting just 1 straight up energy out of your deck, they are not only bad because of the volatility, but also because the upside of flipping multiple heads it doesn't make up for the fact that you can flip double tails, because you can't always use the double heads to their maximum potential.
And this is where Opal becomes better, right?
This is where Opal becomes better because it's an unrestricted search. So if you play Opal, and you flip double heads, you're gonna get the best card out of your deck, and then you're gonna get the second best card out of your deck. But the second best card out of your deck, most likely, is still pretty good. So that's the issue. The first evolution that you get when you flip double heads is pretty good, and then the second evolution you get when you flip double heads, it kind of like it's not always going to be amazing. Sometimes it's good, but sometimes it just isn't. So with Opal, the best card out of your, it's like an unrestricted search, and the second best card out of your deck that you get when you flip double heads. It is just way more likely that it is actually going to be good when you just need to get a twin energy and you flip double heads. You actually can also get like the Gutter Mine to kick your opponent's stadium, or you can get another Chinchino, or you can get a Pyukumuku. I mean, that's kind of silly. Like the point being is the it doesn't fall off. The double heads actually is gonna be very relevant every time, and people kind of hate the double flip cards like Timer Ball, because the double heads is just can be good, but it's not always good, and the double tails is always awful. I mean, it's I would say that kind of makes overall kind of good. Also, the reason why I play it is of course because it finds the energy cards, and a card like Skyla wouldn't be able to find energy cards.
True.
Also, I think a reason why you can get quote unquote away with playing Opal is because it kind of has like a synergy with Snorlax. Like a card like Snorlax, it gets better if you can play down your entire hand. And with Snorlax, it's better to play like a card that finds one specific card that is ideal for the one turn, instead of playing a card like Birdkeeper, because you can Birdkeeper and draw into unplayable cards. But if you play your Opal, you get the one card you always know you get the high quality from your Opal, and you get the high quantity from your Snorlax. So even though Opal you only get one card on average, let's say you just get one card, but even though you get your one ideal card, you might not have that many cards left in hand because you're used to your support for turn to just get one card. But then the Snorlax gets you the massive quantity. So it's like spending your support for turn to just get your best card out of your deck. You might fall behind in pure card quantity, and Snorlax kind of nicely makes up for that fact. So that's like one of the somewhat small synergies. That's also why before I was playing one Opal and one Skyla, both of them. But right now I've gone to the Rotom phone, which is like another card. Kind of, it's not as guaranteed, but it's an item, and I think it gets way better because of Pyukumuku. And especially in the later game, you can, because obviously this deck plays long games. Good in the mid game, and it's really good in the late game, the Rotom phone, to get like that one basic metal energy for Berserker, or that one extra out to get a Dusknoir into play easier, or like just that one extra out to the twin energy or the Yveltal itself, or to like the last Color Mine you have in deck, or to find a boss. I like Rotom phone a lot more than, for example, like Pokegear, which is also something I have considered, just playing one Pokegear. But the Rotom phone is way more versatile. And I think it is better than playing Skyla, because it can find the energies as well.
I think we all heard a lot of reasons now why Opal is good, and not to spoil anything, but I think this is the third time I hear your explanation why Opal is awesome, and I wholeheartedly agree that it's a great explanation, and Opal is a good card. But a lot of people, they don't want to take the chance on it. That's kind of it, right?
I mean, I would say it is still. There are definitely downsides, right?
Obviously, anything flip does have a downside, obviously. Just like your Berserker can also completely fail.
I would personally say if Snorlax wasn't in this deck, the downside is a lot worse. Because if you play your supporter and you flip double tails, which happens 1/4 of the time, every 4 Opals you play, one of them is gonna get double tails, right?
Yeah.
That's not that unlikely, actually.
No.
But having the Snorlax to kind of make up for the fill rate actually plays like somewhat of a relevant factor in the fact that we can actually consider even Opal playing it in the deck. If we didn't have Snorlax, it would be kind of more of a commitment, over like the bad variants would hit harder, if that makes sense. Because Snorlax, if you fill your Opal, you're drawing more cards from Snorlax, right?
What you're doing here to also talk about, like, speaking of this, you're creating an asymmetry in the response to a positive piece of news and a negative piece of news for people who follow us. Or to use a term we used from statistics before, exactly. Right? Indeed. And see, guys, it's good to know your statistics out there. I got a question from the chat. And,
actually, I like this question a lot.
I can see you already have it, but I'm just going to read it out for you. So there's a question here. What about Bunnelby and Orbeetle?
Yes.
Is this a good combo? And I know you already mentioned, say, Crabominable a little bit, because that goes in that direction here, but let's just dive into it. Bunnelby and Orbeetle, what's up?
So first of all, okay, so this the first card that we I guess could talk about is the Orbeetle.
Yeah.
Which I think extremely interesting. And what the most interesting about it is that it doesn't take a lot of deck space, because you can just play one Doppler and one Orbital, and you can already get it into play with the Zoroark line. Or
just
if you
just
play
like with your Dusknoir, basically.
Yes, and with Rare Candy, you could also play not play the if you don't play Berserker in this list, you could consider not even playing the Zoroark line and just playing a Rare Candy for the Dusknoir line instead.
True.
Which is, by the way, another whole discussion. If you want to play Dusknoir with Rare Candy or with Zoroark.
You could do that, but you also have the Gorebyss. You have so many things going into this, of course.
Yeah, it kind of depends on which other decks you are playing, but the Orbital, the interesting thing about it is that, like I said, our late game isn't necessarily as strong as it has been. And the Orbital, the way I look at Orbital is, it kind of, if you want to simplify, because it's like such a, it can give so many different outcomes, right? Like it can, for me to kind of visualize what Orbital does, it kind of means that your opponent is not their one draw per turn is always going to be a bad card. I mean, it's not, obviously that's not always the case, but kind of simplify the effect of Orbital on a game, kind of quantify the value of the card, is that Orbital's effect kind of makes it so that your opponent, their one draw per turn is always going to be a weak card. It's going to be a quick ball, or like an evolution that another VMAX while they already have a VMAX, right? It's going to be like a quote unquote bad card. And one thing about, but in the Pokémon TCG, the draw support obviously is really strong. We have cards like Professor's Research, we have cards like Crobat, we have cards like Marnie, Melanie. You can draw so many cards. Even if the opponent is not top decking a good card every turn, they can just still draw cards. But in Control, the games go so long, your opponent can, first of all, they can run out of draw supporters. This is something that is like a hidden benefit of Control decks, is that most decks are built to play six turns, maybe less. 4 or 5 relevant turns is not that uncommon. So your opponent can run out of supporters, and then Orbital becomes extremely strong. And as well as sometimes your opponent, even though they have a draw supporter like Professor's Research, or even if they have a Marnie but they have good cards in hand, it might be detrimental for them to play their draw supporter. And the fact that you are stopping their top decks from ever being good again has extreme value over the course of a long game. So I feel like Orbital, just in general, as a way to really downgrade your opponent's draw for turn every time again. And it takes unlike Chip Isaacs, which you have to recover over and over, the Orbital is completely free to use. It just takes time to set up your, only ever going to get the Orbital very late. And I especially liked Orbital when we had, when the deck was playing Jolteon, because then your opponent has way less outs to draw supporters. When you have Jolteon in play and your opponent can't use Shady Dealings, the Orbital was very impressive. I was actually really liking it, and then it becomes especially strong when you play like one Bunnelby with it.
Yeah.
Because whenever you see your opponent has like their one switching card on their top of their deck, then you can go in with the Bunnelby. Because in my opinion, a milling type of effect like Bunnelby or Crabominable, it is quite unimpressive by itself, because you're discarding cards that your opponent hasn't even drawn. To me, like if you were ranking the types of disruption or types of ways to get rid of your opponent's resources, the best type of disruption usually is effects that discard cards that your opponent has in play, like Yveltal, like Articuno GX, like Crushing Hammer, like Team Flagrant, like Primaria. Cards that discard cards that your opponent has put into play. They have spent their energy acceleration or their attachment for turn on it, and you discard it. That is the best way to get rid of your opponent's resources, because your opponent has invested their time into it. And then the second best type of resources to discard is options from your opponent's hand. When you have cards like Delinquent or Secreted Stamp plus Jesse, or here Berserker, or you could Sydney. Those type of discarding effects, because you're limiting your opponent's options. You're actively getting rid of cards that your opponent otherwise could have played. But when you are milling cards, it's usually not as impressive as the other two types of resource destruction, because you're discarding cards that your opponent hasn't even drawn into. And also, when you don't know what you're discarding, it's actually very random. Just discarding one random card with Winnowby, or discarding 2 random cards with Abominable, in like a, even if your opponent has only like a 15 card deck left. And if your opponent has like 1 switch, 1 stadium, and 1 let's say your opponent has 1 switch, 1 stadium, 1 Melanie that you really want to hit, it's like 3 out of 15 cards. You're trying to hit those with your Abominable, which is, that's just, you're like an underdog to hit those cards. But
you're more likely to give him the you could even see it. You're more likely to give him the cards in that sense, if you really want to put it like that.
Yeah. And with Orbital, what I really liked is that you can see the cards with Orbital. And if you don't see the right card that you want to discard, you don't have to attack with your milling cards. You are not attacking with Bunnelby unless you know for 100% sure you are hitting the card that you want to discard. So let's say you use your Orbital and you see 3 cards that you don't care about. You're just gonna attack with Morpeko, or you're gonna Intrepid Sword. But if you are using Orbital and you see the exact card you want to discard, you get guaranteed value out of your penalty. So that's why and this is like a late game win condition that is, I would say, maybe the most potent, the most strongest out there. But it does take a decent amount of commitment. It is also, like I said, it is really slow in like in a high paced game. It is not gonna be easy to set this up. And one other thing is, against decks that have a draw engine like Zacian Samacenta or Shadow Rider, which are really bad matchups, this is not ever going to help you. You're not going to win against Zacian Samacenta because you have Orbital and Bunnelby.
No.
Shadow Rider, they are just going to draw cards anyways, and they can just overcome this type of block anyways.
I think this kind of goes in on the second question we got in the chat. Is it worth playing right now?
Yeah, is it worth playing? So I feel like you can counter decks on board well enough with cards like Yveltal and Dusknoir and Perrserker. You can stop your opponent well enough by discarding the energies they have in play, by discarding their trainers in hand. And I feel like that is in some ways better than going this Bunnelby route. And then one other interesting thing about the Vulnerable, which is a new card we have.
Yes.
Well, compared to Bunnelby, it does use water energy, which is, like I said, we use our energies for our engine as well. So playing basic water energies would be somewhat of a commitment. But from Abominable, of course, it discards 2 cards, which is twice as good as Bunnelby.
Yes.
And one thing that I think is very interesting is that it's actually very tanky. Especially when you play Cape of Toughness, you can give it 270 HP. So it survives attacks like Ice Rider, it survives Jolteon, it survives Dragapult, 2 hits from Dragapult. It survives a Suicune, which is very relevant. Unless they have Ludicolo, but usually they don't even try to set up Ludicolo because it's so bad against the rest of the deck.
Indeed, it becomes a target.
It survives Mew even pretty well because 270, they need all their E-powers or their fusion tablets or whatever they are called. So I was thinking about I was trying Ribombee with 1 Cape of Toughness and a water energy, and then when your opponent only has 1 prize card left, you can go in with it and just have something in the active that is actively winning the game. And it is actually tanky. And one other thing I liked about playing the 1 Cape of Toughness, this is something I didn't think about as much before, is that you can actually put the cape on your Zacian, and you're actually pretty happy to put a Cape of Toughness on your Zacian. I actually don't know why I didn't consider this just a good thing to do earlier, because having a 270 HP Zacian, especially when Suicune is it's not a terrible matchup, but it's like maybe a little bit of a sketchier matchup. Just having a tankier Zacian, especially in this, when we don't have reset stamp to punish your opponent. Usually when your opponent, pre-rotation, when your opponent chases your Zacian, they are kind of taking a huge risk because they can get stamped. And if they are bossing a Zacian, they are not playing a Marnie. So when you had like a 10-card hand, pre-rotation I'm talking about.
Yeah, of course.
It would be actually very risky for your opponent to boss KO a Zacian. They are playing into reset stamp, and they are not Marnieing you. But right now, KO Zacian is pretty good because there's no good way to punish them, and So actually improving the HP of your Zacian with a Cape of Toughness actually is not that bad. I was actually considering just playing one Cape or one Archer, even without the Crabominable, and having the Crabominable late game to have something that is really tanky, that isn't easily KO'd by card decks like Ice Rider and Suicune and even like Zacian, I guess, and even Mew. It could be, it was like one of the things I considered to kind of improve the Melanie matchups, and to kind of like just go for the late game Crabominable Game of Toughness, but it felt still, discarding random cards doesn't feel as strong as having the Berserker. And the Orbital, thing is, I feel like a lot of matchups are all about getting the Dusknoir online or getting your energy disruption, let your energies draw into your energy disruption in dual time, or just looping with Morpeko.
Or getting the Gorebyss out.
Yeah, getting Gorebyss out, or just getting the Berserker and getting the switching cards. Like, I felt like the Orbital also isn't as strong, and also I feel like Orbital isn't that strong against Fusion Strike because they have a draw in. Like the reason why I think Orbital is somewhat decent is because just even without the milling, you are just blanking your opponent's card draw for a turn. Like if your opponent is quote unquote like waiting to draw the right card, they are never going to draw the right card when you have Orbital, right?
No.
And but decks like Fusion Strike, they can easily just discard, play some items, and use Genesect to draw more cards. And even a deck like Single Strike, even though Orbital could be somewhat decent, the matchup is not about getting an Orbital into play against Single Strike. It's all about getting a Dusknoir into play. And the Inteleon decks, I also feel like without Jolteon, Orbital is a bit less impressive. I feel like Orbital was especially good when you still had Jolteon. Because then all the level balls and Evo Incenses and the Drizzles and the Inteleon, Shady Dealings Inteleon, they all are basically blanks, right? They're also all battle decks, so it's kind of good. It's kind of reasonable for them to run out of draw supporters earlier, and you can also put a level ball on top of their deck, and it will be a bad card for them to draw. So I feel like the combination of how matchups play out kind of makes me not want to play Orbital. I feel like there's maybe better cards to play instead of Orbital.
But maybe the future meta would change into favoring Orbeez a little more. But in the current point, I get your argument here. I'm gonna pick up on one thing from the chat also, and I think even at this point I know the answer to this, but just to get the question out here, there's a question from the chat that goes, well, if the deck here needs time, why don't you play Altaria? And I will in Altaria indeed to block for Pokemon with rule boxes or V's or VMAXs or whatever in this case. And, well, I would dare to say it's the Mew VMAX, like we already discussed this previously, that this actually makes the card obsolete.
Yeah, Mew VMAX just randomly also kind of destroys Altaria. I guess maybe we can also, before we completely, I think we have talked about this deck a lot, maybe we can also talk about the Corviknight deck a little bit.
Indeed, I think this is a good time to also, so let's round this one off with the Altaria, and then let's move over to the second part.
Yes, so I guess obviously Altaria, it's not good against Single Strike, it's not good against Dragapult, it's not good against Mew VMAX. It's not good against Inteleon decks because they can attack with Inteleon if they have to. So Lone Altaria is never going to work against that either.
I like how we're getting this Altaria here, and while you're saying this, Sander, I'm putting up your Corviknight deck, and then you see a 1/1 Altaria line in it.
This one was the pre-fusion strike.
I know. I'm just joking around with you now.
But Altaria, this kind of it can be decent against Zacian Samacenta, but I feel like they can just attack with Oranguru. Yeah. And I also don't. I know Zacian Samacenta did win a tournament.
Yes. Very recently.
Yeah, very recent. But it doesn't see a lot of play.
No, and of course, I'm just kidding with you here, but the point is, so everybody that can see here, Sander, you also have your Corviknight deck up here. Yeah, this is, of course, a different style of control. So now we're moving into something a little different.
Yeah, this one is maybe type of control I also really like. I know you like this one as well. Just sitting back, doing nothing, draw pass.
Yeah, we've
Like
been there before. We played Wailord, we played Hoopa
played
Gigas. We've done
Wailord,
this many times
we
before.
played Quad Boba Fett,
We played.
Boba Fett break.
Oh, this is the most my favorite type of deck. You travel thousands of kilometers to go somewhere, only
You
to
go.
sit and say pass half the day. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the type of deck that I and one thing about this deck that improves from Fusion Strike, which I don't think people really noticed, is the Adventurous Discovery card is excellent in this deck.
So that's one thing that's not currently in the deck, but now for everybody's I'm just gonna in the meantime also just search out Adventures Discovery, so there's no
Yeah,
no.
it searches triple Pokemon, triple V. So usually in most decks this wouldn't be that impressive because um, you you might need a couple Pokemon V, but usually your support engine like Houndoom or Inteleon, you can't find them.
No.
And even though like it could be nice to play like one Adventurous Discovery over the course of a game to get a couple VMAXs into play or your Suicune or whatever. But usually you don't really go mass VMAX because it doesn't make sense. You only need two VMAXs or maybe to play a game. Two VMAXs already is 6 prizes, so there's no point in playing multiple Adventurous Discoveries usually. Maybe in a deck like Shadow Rider or even I guess Eternatus to fill up your bench. But for this deck, that actually isn't the case. You are actually very happy to get quad Corviknight V into play, because for those who don't necessarily understand how this deck completely functions, it's very similar to how Wailord used to function with Roughseas. By rotating between your Corviknights, you let all of them take a hit, and the more different Corviknights take damage, the more value you get out of the healing from
Crystal Cave in this case.
Crystal Cave, yeah, and even Cheryl. So we used to have like a card like Max Potion, which completely heals.
Yeah.
Now Cheryl, of course, since it's a supporter, it's a bit weaker. But the nice thing about Cheryl is that it does heal multiple of your Pokemon. So rotating between your different VMAXs gets more value out of Cheryl as well. So getting triple or quadruple Corviknight into play is very good for this deck. It's actually one of the few decks that really loves getting multiple VMAXs into play. And for that reason, Adventurous Discovery is just an absolute amazing setup card. Also, it finds Zacian, which is very relevant about Adventurous Discovery. So you can Adventurous Discovery for double Corviknight and a Zacian, and then on the next turn, if you can get another Adventurous Discovery, you get double Corviknight VMAX and another card. And also right now, in my current list, I'm playing a card that has seen a little bit of play right now, and it is Duraludon VMAX.
Aha, good old
Which
Duraludon.
is also a lot easier to set up when you have the quad. I'm playing 4 Adventures Discovery and a Duraludon, which is a pretty good card. I mean, Mew, like we said before, Mew can still hit through it, but Mew does so little damage against this unless they have their psychic energies. And since it's also a dragon type, you can heal it with Crystal Cave. You can actually kind of out heal Mew, and they don't really have that much of a threat against it.
No, so it becomes a nice block. So basically, you choose your block for the game or your wall for the game and see how this goes. That's essentially what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's kind of like playing a circuitry, and it is pretty easy to set up with Adventurous Discovery. And also the basic Duraludon is kind of tanky because it has an ability that blocks 30 damage.
Indeed, there's just a lot of things speaking for it, and of course this deck also takes advantage of Boost Shake. I don't know about your new list because obviously people noticed I'm sitting with the old list here. We were a little hasty getting started, so we focused on the other deck. So hence we're still looking at the old list here on the screen right now. But
I mean, I feel like this list functions pretty well. The Boost Check is really nice to get the Altaria into play without the Swablu being a target. So when I'm not playing the Altaria anymore because it doesn't work against
Mew,
it doesn't work against Mew, which is of course a big drawback. Also, the big downside of this deck is that it has a really bad single strike matchup, but that is only if they play the Urshifu VMAX.
Yeah, because it hits everything. Yeah,
it hits through everything, and it can one shot the VMAXs twice. So there's no way to really prevent that prevent losing to Urshifu VMAX. But some lists they play like the Gengar version, and I mean I don't know if the Gengar version is that popular, but the Gengar version definitely has a way bigger. They can't really beat Duraludon. So, but so this deck has actually a relevant upgrade with Adventurous Discovery, which actually makes it a lot more viable. But I think meta-wise, you can counter Mew VMAX, but you can't really deal well with Single Strike. So it's meta-wise. Single Strike is sometimes the most played deck. It's like one of the top 2 decks, since it also kind of counters Mew, I guess. So I guess meta-wise, it's maybe not in the perfect position. But I think when we get maybe in the future, if we ever get the DCE, and you can play this deck with a Eldegoss and boost energy, then
this becomes
deck,
fun.
Yes, then this deck really has some excellent tools.
For those who don't know this, being able to Eldegoss over and over and over again feels like Lusamine, doesn't it, Sander? I remember you mentioning this.
It is more or less a Lusamine, and you just the way you have to think about it, like the first time you use Eldegoss and you use Turbo Energy and you shuffle it back into your deck.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you get what equals a little bit of value out of it. Okay, sure. But the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, like it's like that same idea that I alluded to earlier, that your game plan is stopping your opponent from winning. You're putting all kind of this deck puts all kind of walls and defensive cards in front of your opponent that are hard to get through. So your opponent progressing their win condition is just very hard. This deck is all about making it as hard as possible for your opponent to win, and then having some way to take advantage out of that. And Eldegoss is exactly what does that, right? If your opponent has a difficult time going through your VMAXs, and then you're slowly accumulating value with this Eldegoss loop, you can actually run your opponent out of resources. And it is like the type of thing that really fits this deck very well, because in this deck you don't want like easy target. That is what made Lusamine so strong and so frustrating to play against. It's because you could have a field full of Regigigas and Hoopas, and for example, in Expanded right now you can see decks that have like Lily's Pokédolls, and they have Robo Substitutes, and they are just grinding you out with Lusamine. And unless you have some type of hand disruption, there's no way to kind of deal with the Lusamine, because they play it from their hand and there's nothing to target on the field. And the Eldegoss is kind of similar, because it shuffles itself back into the deck. You are never leaving any vulnerable target. That's why, even though you could play Dialga in this deck, I don't even necessarily know if that's even worth it, because the Dialga is just going to get KO'd, and it doesn't really synergize with the deck all that well. But Eldegoss is exactly the type of card you want. It takes itself out of play, and it generates resources. It leaves no easy targets, and it gives the deck a very efficient, infinite.
So to sum up a little on this deck here, from what I also understand, and that is that right now this deck may not be the best choice, but there's definitely some potential moving forward when knowing the cards we're going to get eventually, right? We've seen this new double colorless energy that reduces 20, and we've seen this coming, so we know that's going to come eventually. That's at least the hope. And meaning this deck may not be very good now, but looking forward, there are some really interesting things we can do with it.
Yeah, and in general, just the defensive VMAX style of decks, they get like a actual engine with Eldegoss plus Turbo Boost.
Oh, and let's not start on that Charon support that's going to come, because that's opening a whole new Pandora's box of fun things we can do.
Yeah, the new Acerola and the Acerola type of effect, and then also you could play it with Pedant or with Togekiss. I mean, in Togekiss you probably also play the Eldegoss stuff. You just have the Togekiss, and then also use Eldegoss load.
Well, I can already say what a lot of people are going to say. That's going to be gross, because that's a typical response you hear when you start doing this to people. And I think that's kind of where this becomes a lot of fun.
I mean, it looks strong. I mean, it kind of still reliant on tanking hits with a triple pricer. So that always was the nice thing about Regigigas, right? And Steelix as well.
Yeah, it was one pricers, right?
It's like if your opponent has something to one-shot it, usually hitting that hard takes resources. Like the one blow attack from Urshifu. It discards all their energies, but they can just do it twice and win the game.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an issue with having triple prizes being your tanks. So like decks like Rayquaza and Single Strike, they are always going to be quite strong against this type of deck. So it is still going to be a little bit meta dependent, but I could also easily see a situation where the meta shifts a bit, and for whatever reason, there's not that much single striker decks that can one shot, and this deck is just the core idea of the deck could just be very very good. And it is very specifically the Urshifu VMAX that is an issue, because otherwise there you can play like I said, the Duraludon, which is otherwise really strong against the single strike. And also you can play the Yveltal when you have the turbos, the new
the double one, yeah.
Yeah, because it also, of course, just works on Yveltal.
And you can play Slurpuff, right?
You could play Slurpuff. You could play Shaman. You know, one card I also kind of find funny is the Wobbuffet. There's a Wobbuffet that puts damage on your opponents equal to the damage on one of your bench Pokemon. So you can also have like some counter offensive.
Yeah, because that's one thing. That's one thing we haven't seen much here in the current decks. Is usually the control decks always had an element of being able to remove that one threat on the board.
Yeah.
That was typically something that had to happen.
So I guess if we are talking a bit more about the future, maybe we are seeing the V-Union. I think it's called V-Union abilities and attacks. Maybe we'll get some Full Metal Wall or Cold Crush type of effect. We don't know.
It would be wonderful to get a Cold Crush back.
If we get something like that is, I would agree, that is a combat card, and like this type of like mass removal that like punishes your opponent from putting all their acts in one basket. We don't really have anything reliable right now that gets rid of all of your opponent's energies in one go.
I think
so.
I think this nicely sums up what we had on the agenda today. Unless Sander, you have any final remarks before I would like to call it a day? Because I think we discussed a lot of interesting things.
I think we discussed a lot. I mean, what I hope is that what is like how do you say it? This is well structured enough for people to get some information out of. I hope we kept it well structured. I think whenever I try to explain things, that sometimes can be an issue.
Oh well, I think I'm honest when I say that there's a lot of good tips and tricks in here for people who want to try out control, and also you covered indeed a lot of good bases on the current control, and also looking a bit forward. So one thing for sure is control is not dead. It's never been dead, and it's certainly not dead now.
I'm waiting. I think we are both waiting eagerly for the IRL events.
Oh yeah, sure. I can't wait. And then it's going to be a whole lot of fun coming back. And for people out there, well, if they see Sander Wojcik on the roster, you can be pretty sure what type of deck is coming your way.
Yeah, it's no secret that I always love these type of decks. In a way, I guess because I think we have also privately talked about this. Like when control is not on the radar, because it's like quote unquote not meta or it's not as strong. If you still play it, people are not going to counter you. They're not going to be prepared for you. And with closed deck list, they're also going to have zero information about what exactly you're playing.
Closed deck list is going to be very important, also, I think.
I still think like you have to put in the effort to actually make it a good deck. Like you're not gonna do well if you have a bad deck and you have to rely on your opponent having no experience.
No, of course not. But it definitely adds on your favor if the opponent don't know what you have.
That control is so underrated is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it also is for like somewhat of a good reason. There's no like we said, there's no mass removal like a Full Metal Wall.
But maybe something is coming next set. From what we know, Sander, they're going to reprint it. We have no idea, right?
yeah, we have no idea. And I feel like, I think we said this in the beginning, but I feel like finally the meta is revolving more around one type of product, which is Mew VMAX. And that makes it easier to predict the meta and counter the decks that either are Mew VMAX itself or decks that counter Mew VMAX. So I feel like right now, Control not only does Control have reasonable tech cards and cards you can play to deal with the meta, but also the meta is a bit more focused around a couple like 4 or 5 decks instead of like 10 viable decks.
No, indeed.
So
the concentration of decks makes it easier.
Yes, even right now, I'm quite happy with the Chinchino box decks. I guess for Corviknight there's too much single strike left now.
And I think not to cut you short, Sander, but I think this is an excellent time to say, ladies and gentlemen, that was all we had for today. And again, Sander, thank you so much for taking the time and being here live here today. And if you are watching this back, well, take the time for being part of this episode. And this was another class in Stefan's classroom. And well, I hope to see you back for another one. And thank you again for joining, Sander. And well, until next time, Sander.
Yes,
bye-bye.
Until next time.
Bye, everyone. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Thank you.